You? Yes. Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to all the participants to this seventh session of the FTP. I would take this opportunity to introduce our speaker of the session, Dr. Uh, T. Srinivas. Dr. T. Srinivas is a professor in ECE Department, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He obtained his BSc degree in physics from New Science College, Hyderabad, and ME and PhD from IISc. He was a postdoctoral research fellow at Toyohashi University of Technology, Japan, during 1992 to 1996. His area of research interest is optical communications, in particular photonic integrated circuits. He published about 150 papers and guided 28 PhD students. He is a member of the National Board of Accreditation, NBA. He was the chairman of GATE, IISc Zone during 2010 to 2013. He is an active volunteer of IEEE Bangalore section and was the chair of IEEE Photonics Society and IEEE Communication Society Bangalore chapter. Photonics Society chapter Bangalore section. He has supported several IEEE Society chapters and many IEEE student branches in Bangalore section. A warm welcome to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I have sent the slides to Dr. Triveni. I hope she has. You can launch them maybe.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I will launch.
Yeah.
Just a second.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you. I will thank Dr. Triveni and the organizers for inviting me to this FDP. Okay, let us get into the subject. Then we'll have a lot of opportunity to discuss many other things. If there is any network or any other interruption, please let me know. And maybe the Dr. Triveni or someone can call me on the phone also. Okay, this topic, as I have already seen the schedule of your workshop and found that it is based on quantum and photonics. So on the first day I spoke about quantum communications and quantum computing. Today we'll discuss about photonic integrated circuits, which will play a crucial role, particularly in quantum applications. There are many other applications like communications, then you have biomedical applications, industrial applications, and so on, where we need photonic integrated circuits. In fact, we can take a parallel from VLSI technology. So the present day applications have all benefited from VLSI only because of VLSI. In the olden days, we used to build the systems and circuits on a lab table, like a breadboard or a PCB. So now all these things have gone into chip form. Similarly, if optical engineering and optical applications have become practical, then we need optical VLSI. So that is the idea in this subject. Whatever we do, of course, there are a lot of systems and applications which for some extent can be benefit even without PICs, but this will be a big booster to the technology, and I hope this will come definitely in near future. In fact, let us go to the opening slide, please. I will describe a few more things as we go along. First slide, next slide, please. Hello.
Just a second, sir.
Yes, thank you. So this is a brief outline of my presentation. We'll talk, of course, not much about photonics, but a lot of passive devices and many applications and little bit of our work. And I will not use much mathematics, but I hope, like what I mentioned earlier, unless we understand things very clearly, not superficially, there is no use of doing all this. We can learn just little bit of whatever we need and we can get along. The present day society allows superficial knowledge also. But if you have a deeper knowledge of any subject, that's a very great boost to both our understanding, our careers, and also the overall scheme of things. That's what is my opinion. But of course, I will not use mathematics today. But if someone is interested in deeper things, there are a lot of literature is available, books and papers. And also, you may please visit and read my NPTEL course on photonic integrated circuits for a more mathematical treatment of all these subjects. Let us go to next slide, please. So as I mentioned, maybe, or everyone would have mentioned, that photonics is a science and technology of using light wave particles. Light has got a dual nature or a composite nature. It is not only a particle, it is not only a wave, a combination of that, and some properties are still elusive. We don't know about light. So from a communication engineer's point of view, these are the operations that you come across. We do a lot of information related operations in communications. So you generate the information and also the corresponding signals. I'm not saying only information, but the corresponding signals and corresponding carrier waves. So that is what we do with in communications. We can generate these information and signals and carriers. You can control them. You can transmit light waves. You can do a lot of optical signal processing. You can display this information and so on and so forth. Maybe you can also store the information. That is not very clear yet. It doesn't have a parallel in electronics. See, most of the operations that we talk about have parallel in electronics. You have a modulation in electronics. You can do optical modulation. You also have parallels in bulk optics. Like you have an optical table or lenses, prisms, mirrors and so on. All these can be translated into miniature form. So these are the parallels that people take. So we'll have to look at the fundamental properties of these electrons and photons if you want to understand clearly what this photonics is. In fact, people think, or the real definition, or if you want to say, of photonics will be when we use the dual nature of this, not simply particle nature or wave nature. But still, like in electronics, we can use this definition very loosely. And of course, we will definitely try to understand deeper. Maybe 2 points I have put here. Electrons, the properties of fundamental properties of electrons, they are very massive relative to photons, I mean, and they have a certain charge and use Fermi-Dirac statistics to study their semiconductor properties and so on and so forth. Similarly, or in contrast, we use Bose-Einstein statistics to study the properties of photons. You can say that photons have zero rest mass and zero charge. And you already observe that we are using probability distributions to describe their properties. That means they are quantum nature, as I mentioned in the first lecture. Okay, we will not discuss too much about quantum nature, etc. Today we will try to talk more about the practical aspects, the devices, and wave theory is sufficient to understand all these things. And of course, mathematics is needed, but we will not use. Let us go to the next slide, please. You can say integrated optics is analogous to integrated electronics. Like I mentioned, all these components can be made on a small chip. So the main objective of the integrated optics or photonic integrated circuit is to create various optical components for a given system on a small substrate, single substrate. And there are a lot of examples. You have, for networking applications, you have N-by-N switch arrays. You have a fiber optic gyroscope chip, which we made in our lab. Then in the recent times, there's a lot of interest in MEMS, optical MEMS. So people have constructed an optical bench on a silicon wafer. Some of these I will be able to show, I suppose, in this lecture. Let us go to the next slide, please. So this is a typical example of a photonic integrated circuit. What we are seeing is top view of an integrated optical modulator on a lithium niobate substrate. The technology is called the titanium diffused lithium niobate. I would like to mention one more point. I will not delve too much on the technology aspect also, because I have already seen in your schedule there you had some technology related lectures. So whatever is needed, I will mention. So this is called the lithium niobate optical modulator. So you have a Mach Zehnder interferometer where you have these double lines are all waveguides, and you can launch light into these waveguides as you see, the light wave will split across the two arms of the interferometer and it recombines back into the output port. So during this process, you can change the properties of these arms of the interferometer. For example, in this case, I am showing you that there are these bluish ones which are electrodes. You can apply voltages and change the properties of lithium niobate, and so you can modulate the light wave. So the light wave is modulated in the arms of the interferometer. It is very easy to understand, appreciate. You can say that light propagates as e power I omega t minus beta z, where beta is the propagation constant, which contains refractive index. Beta is 2 pi by lambda into delta n. N is the refractive index. So you can change the refractive index and phase modulate the light wave. And by using this configuration, you can convert this into amplitude modulation. So you can get an amplitude modulated wave at the output. Whatever voltage that you put on this will appear as the cos square theta component in the amplitude modulation. So this effect or this phenomenon of change of refractive index with applied voltage can be called as electro-optic effect. You are changing the optical properties by applying electric fields. So there are a lot of advantages of this modulator, like very good performance, very high bandwidth, very low voltages for operation, very small size, very good reduced chirp characteristics, and so on and so forth. So you should contrast. This is an alternative to semiconductor based modulators. You can directly modulate a semiconductor laser diode by applying currents. Injection current can be modulated, but that has got all the deficiencies, like the bandwidth may not be high, the chirping characteristics, so many things. So this is a very good option, and if you want to go for high speeds of 10 gigabits per second and 100 gigabits per second systems, we'll have to go for external modulators like this, and these are available commercially nowadays. Let us go to another slide, please. So this is another device which is interesting and very popular and very versatile device. If you want to make a lot of optical engineering, optical components on the chip for many applications, you can use this. This is called the directional coupler. There are two waveguides very close together, and when you launch light into one waveguide, it can excite or it can get transferred, it can tunnel into the second waveguide. So there are two input ports and two output ports. You can launch in the first port and tunnel into the second port. And once again and that is the basic operation. And once again, by using the electro-optic effect, you can effectively change the refractive index and so the effective length of the waveguide, and you can transfer back to the same port. That means you can get the bar state or crossover state of this device. You can use it as optical switch. When there is voltage, it is one state. When there is no voltage, it is zero state. So this is a little bit about technology aspect of it. The symbols are not very clear, but typically we use titanium diffused lithium niobate waveguides. If you diffuse traces of titanium into these substrate by using some lithographic mechanism, you can get waveguides. And of course, once again, you can use the same lithography to print electrodes, a buffer layer, and you can have LAN pads and so many other practical things on this waveguide. Typical dimensions are a few microns, 4 microns, 8 microns, etc. And the process will need about 1000 degrees centigrade for about 8 hours. That is the typical values of the technology. And a very thin layer of titanium is sufficient. About 200 angstroms of titanium is sufficient to make very good waveguides. And of course, the electrode structure will depend on the impedance characteristics and all those things that you need. Okay, so we'll have to match the impedance. I'm showing only the electrodes here, but you need the LAN pads. You have to have the place to apply the voltages, and you have to collect them. You have to compute. You have to design the RC properties, the bandwidth characteristics, and all those things. So a lot of interesting technology and theory is involved in all these devices. Let us go to one more slide, please. So these are the typical or the basic features of photonic integrated circuits. Most of them are based on single mode operation. All the waveguides that you see across are single mode operation. This has resulted from the technology of fiber optics. In fiber optics, most of the applications we use now the single mode optical fiber to avoid dispersion and other characteristics. Even though it is not necessary, I mean, of course, the design and all will get more complicated, but most of the integrated optical devices are based on single mode structure. And there is also, due to the lithography, you have got very good alignment and all these features, stability features of these devices. You can connect an optical modulator with a waveguide, with a polarizer, and all those things on the same chip, and you need not worry too much about the alignments. This is in contrast to the bulk optics, where if you are trying to construct some system on an optical table, it is very, very difficult to align and also retain the alignment. So these problems are solved by integration and by photonic integration. And also we have already seen that we can control the guidance characteristics. You can change the direction of propagation, you can change the phase shift properties and all those things by using the external effects, like by lithography itself you can make a bent waveguides or branches and so on, and by using the electro-optic and other effects you can control the phase. Then the operating voltages are quite small because these are all very small dimensions and you can make them very closer. So the voltages required are not much. This is in contrast to bulk electro-optic effects which were studied in the long olden days, that hundreds of volts they have to apply to get a good modulation. Now you don't need to do that. And also voltages are small and interaction lengths also are very small. You don't need very long lengths of interaction to get a good modulation or other control characteristics. And correspondingly, the bandwidth and speed of operations also are quite good because of all these small dimensions. Another important feature of these photonic integrated circuits is the optical power density is very large. Because the dimensions are small, even if you launch a small amount of optical power, the intensity is very, very large inside, which can be made use to make some devices. In particular, you can make nonlinear optical effects in the optical waveguides easily compared to bulk optics or other. And like VLSI circuits, they are very compact, lightweight, and all these benefits. Batch production, low cost, all these things will result due to this integration. Let us go to one more slide, please. Very briefly, the historical aspect of this photonics technology, you can say 90s, 60s is the time when all this theory has developed. All the waveguide theory, fiber optic theory and all have developed in 60s, starting with the invention of laser. Then during 70s, there's a lot of development in optoelectronics. A lot of semiconductor technology in the beginning days has happened in 70s, technology part, not principles. Principles have come earlier. And then there are a lot of applications in 1980s, particularly the fiber optic communication systems on the optic side and on the internet, on the information technology side. And then there is gradual convergence. People thought that fiber optics can be used for optical networking. So that's what people thought in 1980s and 90s. And there's the idea of what is called this WDM. In electronics, we are very familiar with TDM, FDM, and so on and so forth. And here, the WDM is invented. It is actually just a simple modification of FDM, where you will use several wavelengths to communicate. That means we need devices which can handle many wavelengths at a time. In particular, we need multiplexers, demultiplexers of these wavelengths. So now people talk about more and more photonics and all optical operations. We can say that electronics has saturated. If you see the developments in IT and this hardware and semiconductor industry, of course there's a lot of development in the memories, but the fundamental limits seem to have reached. So we cannot change too much. We should go for what is called this functional approach. If you want to achieve a function, how do we achieve? Either by electronics or photonics. And a lot of potential is there in the wave theory. If you use the wave properties, there are a lot of new applications can be invented. Like for example, optical computers can be constructed if you use the wave properties of light. You can do matrix multiplication, you can do the polynomial evaluation, all those things using optical devices, integrated optical devices. Of course, these are all conventional applications which have been done with electronics. Emerging applications include the quantum communications, which is the topic of this FDP. If you need quantum computers, we need photonics. There is no way. People have tried with atomic systems, molecular systems, nuclear systems, etc. But still we don't have a quantum computer. So the solution is in photonics. So better learn photonics if you want to work in quantum computing. Let us go to another slide, please. Of course, the other important application is biology. We have been ignoring biology after the high school. Most of the engineers will not know how we get fever. Very simply. So we have to learn a lot of biology if you want to make biological applications. And this is may not be the right lecture, but photonics will play an important role in biology. Already a lot of optics is playing a role in biomedical applications, and a lot more scope is there. So these are the two areas I think will be important in this century, and in the next 10 years is a crucial period where we have to develop a lot of applications and so on. Otherwise, it is not that some other technology will overtake. We will not be able to proceed further if we don't work much in photonics. We will be remaining in this present state, only pushing a little bit. You may be improving memories, you may be improving the processor speed, etc. And of course, a lot of development is happening on the services side. A lot of applications are demanding, but we are not able to meet by electronics. So we should go for photonics to do all these things. So let us get back to the basics of photonic integrated circuits. So you can say that an optical waveguide is a basic element of photonic integrated circuits. It will form the interconnection element like the wires in electronics. So optical waveguides will form the basic interconnection elements. You can also make devices on the optical waveguides, passive waveguide devices. Passive waveguide devices means there is no control, external control. Examples are the Y branches, tapers, gratings, curved waveguides, and so on and so forth. All this can be made with optical waveguides. You can also make dynamic devices, like the modulator, what we have seen, optical switches. So they will use all these dynamic effects, like electro-optic effect, acousto-optic effect, and so on and so forth. So we are not simply discarding electronics. You see, a lot of semiconductor electronics is already there, and photonics and electronics can coexist, and new types of applications can come in. This is the domain of optoelectronics. So it may not have the bandwidth and such features I have talked about just now, but definitely electronics interaction between matter and light waves is going to be an important requirement in applications. For example, we need to create lasers, new types of lasers. That will require optoelectronic effects. As I mentioned earlier, light, electrons, and they will have to interact with the molecules and other material properties to create a lot of biomedical applications. In all these things, technology is very, very important. Simply solving equations and so on is not sufficient. Design, simulation, all those things are fine, needed, necessary. But the more important thing is to realize these devices and apply them. That's where the technology will play an important role. If you want to say make a pulse pressure monitoring biosensor based on PACs, you have to go through starting with the device principles, then the technology, packaging, application, and so on. All these operations are very, very necessary, and we cannot stop with modeling and simulation. That's what most people do. That's why I will definitely criticize, and I will also suggest and advise everyone to don't stop at modeling and simulation. But of course, it is difficult to get the fabrication facilities to set up. Now it has become more and more expensive to set up these facilities. But definitely, there are avenues and ways by means of which you can do that. Okay. In the end, we will discuss such professional issues. All these will come under professional issues, how to go about. You are interested in the subject, you want to do something, but how to go about doing that. Simply reading a book or listening to a lecture is not going to be sufficient. Let us go to another slide, please. So these are the different types of waveguides that you will come across. So these are all cross sections. The first one is called a buried waveguide. You make a lithograph, you make a slit in the pattern and diffuse the impurity into the substrate. That is the buried waveguide. So the light is confined in both directions, in the cross section, X and Y directions, if you assume the Z as the propagation direction. Similarly, you can make a ridge waveguide by depositing another material on top of the substrate and then etching out unnecessary regions. Here again, the light is confined in 2 dimensions. There is also what is called the slab waveguide, where the whole top surface, without using lithography, you diffuse. So the whole top surface is the waveguide. That means the light is confined in the depth direction, but not in the width direction. These are called the slab waveguide or planar waveguide. You can take a planar waveguide and load it. You can, by lithography, you load a planar waveguide with some other dielectric material which will change the refractive index, effective refractive index below the loaded medium. Similarly, you can use metal regions to change the waveguide properties. So these are called the loaded type of waveguides. And also we have already seen earlier that you can induce waveguides by applying voltages. So by applying the electro-optic effect, you can change the voltage and you can make a waveguide. These are all the various waveguides that you will come across. It depends on the technology. A lot of possibilities are there, but the broader principles are the light is confined in the X and Y directions. Let us go to one more slide, please. So this is a brief chart about the technology. There are a lot of material systems that are useful. You can make integrated optical devices in glass. You have seen the lithium niobate, you can do on silicon. There are new materials like nitrides, and 3,5 materials also are coming up, which are not shown here. And also, if you want to use magnetic properties, you have to use magnetic materials. Silicon, of course, is the most prominent material in the recent times, and these are all very important things for technology. Of course, depending on the material system, you have the fabrication process. So you can do deposition, you can do various types of depositions are there, like chemical deposition, physical deposition, thermal deposition, and so on and so forth. And you can also do the ion exchanges. This is another standard process. Then if you go to semiconductor devices, you can do growth, epitaxial growth techniques. These are all the various ways in various technological issues that you will come across. I will not dwell too much on the technology now. Let us go to another slide. So I'll show you some passive devices. Passive device in the sense there is no control from outside. So these are all the various components that you are familiar. You can say, you can easily understand what is their function. I'll just show you by using the pictures. Let us go to the next slide. So if you want to divide, these are all top view what you are seeing. If you want to divide the incoming power into 2 output ports, you can do a 1/2 switch, 1/2 power divider, coupler, you can see, or power divider you say. So there is a certain width of the waveguide, single mode, and their output also single mode. But here you have a tapering region where the power is spread and then divided. So how it happens, you cannot explain without using mathematics. There are a lot of interesting features. There's this sharp corner bend is there, there's a taper is there, and so on. There's a coupling between the waveguides in these two, in the nearby the branching region. These are all the interesting feature of a Y branch. If you want to learn optical waveguide theory and devices, this is a very, very interesting device. It is not so, it's a very elusive thing. You cannot understand in a simple way just like that. There will be a lot of questions if you ask yourself. Okay, it's a very interesting subject. Of course, nowadays a lot of simulators are there. Many people are interested in simulation. Simply put the structure in that simulator and it gives you the electric field profile, both at every point. But how that profile is created, you don't know, except for the technique that is involved. Most of the devices use FDTD technique, finite difference time domain. We have to learn that. Of course, everything is done by the software. We need not worry so much, but if you are interested only in the result, that is enough. So there are a lot of other options for us, power division. So this is there is a straight waveguide incoming with the second part, asymmetric 2 branch, and then you can tap a small portion of that. Then you have a 3Y branch. You can make like this. So you can imagine whatever way you like, and you can also predict how it works, but we have to prove how it works. Okay. You can also have a 1/2 power dividers, combine them, cascade them, and get 1/4 or 1/8 power dividers. Let us go to another slide. So directional coupler we have seen, if there are 2 waveguides, the light can tunnel from one waveguide to other waveguide. That's what I said. How does it tunnel? For that you have to go once again to the wave theory. Okay. For the time being, you can take an analogy from electronics. So in the semiconductor devices, if there are many layers, And you know, there is, even though there is a potential barrier between different layers, the electrons can tunnel. There is a finite probability of electrons appearing in different regions. Similarly, the light can tunnel across waveguides. Even though there is a low refractive index region in between the waveguides, the light can tunnel from first port to the second port. So if you want to learn more about this, you have to learn what is called this coupled mode theory. Okay, using that you can solve and see how much light comes out, how to design crossover state, how to design a 3 dB state. All those things can be solved by using the directional coupler. And some of you may be interested in quantum applications, because we said that for quantum engineering we need to do all these devices. The device will look similar. For the quantum application also, a directional coupler is useful, but its functionality and its properties will be different from classical light wave technology. Okay. For that, what you have to do is you have to combine the wave equation with Schrodinger's equation. Schrodinger equation will represent the quantum phenomena, and the wave equation will represent the optical traditional wave phenomena. If you combine them, you will get the quantum properties of all these devices like directional coupler. So I will mention in a very simple way for the time being. So if you launch light into the first port, it can tunnel into the second port according to the coupled mode theory. Similarly, if you launch two waves S1 and S2 into the first and second ports, they can become S2 and S1. Crossover state is possible. So in the quantum sense, if you launch a single photon through this waveguide, suppose it can tunnel into this, but as you know, the photon cannot be divided. So whether it appears of the first port or second port, you cannot say. So there is only a finite probability that it comes out of the first port, another probability. So alpha into ket 0 plus alpha into ket 1, or alpha into field in the first port, alpha into beta into ket of the field in the second port is the output description of the single photon that you launch into this. Similarly, if you launch two photons, one from the first port and the other from the second port, by a linear combination of these photon states, you can describe the property of this directional coupler for quantum applications. Of course, you need to work out further. You have to take up the PDFs of these distribution of these photons and then superpose and study what is the probability distribution across the output ports for how to describe the photon. Okay, that is the practical way, or from an engineering point of view. From a theoretical point of view, a lot of quantum optics is available now using the operator notation and Hilbert space approach. You can study rigorously how all these things behave. So there are a lot of literature is there, integrated quantum photonics. Technology also is available to create single photon sources, photon detectors, and so on. It's a lot of logic gates, all those things, quantum logic gates, all those things can be done with photonic integrated circuits. Some pictures I have shown you in the first, very, what is that called, superficial photos I have shown in the first lecture. All those things are possible to study. I would suggest the interesting part of all this is the mathematics and quantum optics. These two we should learn thoroughly. That is very necessary. Okay, let us get going. You can have a three waveguide directional coupler. Three waveguides are close together. Light can tunnel from first waveguide to the second or third, whatever combination. Okay, so you can work out using the coupled mode theory. Let us go to another slide. The middle one is where there is no gap. If you merge these two waveguides, what happens? Double the width here, and some interesting phenomena will happen here. You can do mode splitters, power dividers, all those things can be designed by using these directional couplers. Let us go to one more slide, please. So star coupler definitely is needed in many applications in electronics. Similarly, if you want to do optical networking, you need a star couplers. You can distribute the power across all the users by using the star couplers. Light enters through one of the ports and will be redistributed across all the other ports. How to do it is a mystery still. In the sense, rigorous mathematics is not available. You can do geometrical optics and little bit of some very crude geometrical optics you can do to study how it happens. Of course, rigorous theory also is possible, but can be said to be more complicated based on FDTD or so. We can study these, but because this is multimode, then a lot of intricate things can come, more complicated things can happen. Similarly, you can also like this. This is called the transmission type of star couplers. You can have a reflex type of star couplers where one end is made as a mirror. So light can be launched from one of the ports and then redistributed across the output ports. So a lot of conventional theory is available for this also, but we need not worry so much. You can come out with some other new ideas to redistribute power across different users in a network. Okay, let us get going. One next slide, please. So, as you know, light is a vector wave. Vector wave. So it has got 6 components: Ex, Ey, Ez, Hx, Hy, Hz. So all components are necessary. So conventionally, in bulk optics, in conventional optics, you have horizontal polarization and vertical polarization. So in the waveguides, you have in general hybrid modes. Sometimes they can be reduced to TE-like modes and TM-like modes, or horizontal-like polarization and vertical-like polarization. The rigorous description is all 6 components will be needed. Okay. So how do you manipulate this? You know that materials can be anisotropic. Means it has got different properties in different directions. In particular, they have got different refractive index in different directions. So it depends on the direction of your waveguide, direction of your light propagation, and the type of mode that you are launching, and so on. So all the 6 components are affected and can be manipulated by using these crystals. So anisotropy is the crux, key to the polarization properties. So there are different ways to realize polarization. You have a glass waveguide in the below, which is isotropic. On the top of it, you coat a anisotropic material like calcite. Lithium niobate is also a anisotropic material. On top of this, you can coat another material and you can use these control of polarization. In fact, you can change the properties by applying voltages also to the anisotropic crystals, and you get a lot of polarization control. Yes, let us go further. So mux demuxes, as you know, are important. These are the ways that you can realize mux demuxes. Here gratings are used. I'll describe gratings in a minute. These blackish vertical things can be considered as gratings. Grating is nothing but a periodic change in the refractive index. In the conventional sense, you have rulings. There's scratches, vertical lines drawn on a glass plate or a whatever substrate, and if you launch light onto that, the light will be dispersed and diffracted by this grating. So, and one important property is these gratings are wavelength dependent. So they are very, very sensitive to the light frequency. So in this application of mux and demux, the optical fiber is bringing in 4 light waves of wavelengths lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, etc. And the first waveguide is designed to deflect the first wavelength and pass through all other wavelengths. Similarly, the second waveguide is designed to deflect second wavelength into the second into this direction. You can say theta 1, theta 2, etc. And you can present and you can construct detectors to receive these. So that's how you can make a demultiplexer in an integrated optic form. And similarly, you can also have a reflection type of gratings where the light will be reflected rather than transmitted. Let us go to another slide. Lenses are conventional devices in optics. We want to use lenses for many applications. You can converge the light waves, you can do focusing, and so on and so forth. A lot of things are possible. When you want to translate things that are there in the bulk into integrated form, we need these lenses. There are different ways to construct the lenses. So in this first one, it's called a gradient index lens. The refractive index changes. This blackish region is just refractive index variation is what is shown here. So it's maximum here reduced as it goes out. So when there is a uniform, see this is constructed on a planar or a slab waveguide. On top of that we make a grating. So when the light wave is passing through this slab waveguide, the top layer, which is the grating, will perform various functions like convergence. So you can converge this light wave at a particular point. Similarly, you can diverge the light wave. And you can create the grating in different ways. You can also create what is called this gradient thickness. grating. So the thickness, the width is changed by lithography to be different. So it will also have a similar function. You can easily guess that it is more easy to manipulate the lithography rather than the deposition process. So this is more convenient that way. Functioning is same. You can work out all the mathematics of this to see how where it converges, what is the focal length, all those things can be calculated. Let us go to one more slide. So gratings, as I said, are very important. They have many applications. In the present day, one of the important problems, you can say, challenges of photonic integrated circuits is to connect them with outside optical fibers and light waves. How do you launch light into the waveguide? Is an important problem and an important question. So gratings are the answer. You can create gratings on the waveguides and you can launch light into the optical circuit. So there's the first important application of that. Similarly, you can couple waveguides using the gratings. If there are two gratings or two different substrates, you can join them by using these gratings and couple light from one chip to the other chip. We have already seen that gratings can deflect light. These are deflectors. You can also have reflectors. In the waveguide itself, you can construct gratings. Like in the case of fibers, you have fiber Bragg gratings, which will deflect light, and a lot of applications in sensors. You can deflect the light using the gratings. Similarly, you can do the mode conversion. If you have multi-mode devices, you can manipulate the modes, first mode to second mode or second mode to third mode, etc. can be converted by using these gratings. They are also used in the lasers as a reflectors. At the both ends, you can make gratings and then reflect light, and you can make laser cavities by using these gratings. So you can also use these gratings for filtering applications and many more applications. Let us proceed. So this is called an arrayed waveguide grating. It's one of the popular devices and commercial devices, and a lot of applications in optical communications and many other applications. So the function is like this. The requirement is there are several input waveguides and several output waveguides. We need to interconnect signals from one waveguide to the other waveguides. So you can create a matrix of operation. First mode to the second waveguide, third mode to the fourth waveguide, etc. All combinations, you can construct a matrix of requirement. And then how to achieve. And of course, we can assume that they can be at different wavelengths also. So that is the complexity of this device. That you can, the functional complexity of the device. So just let us assume a demultiplex action to understand this principle. Let us say that light is coming in the first port, and you want to, and there are several channels here, lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, lambda 4, etc. And you want to separate them out, lambda 1 to the first port, lambda 5 to the fifth port, and so on. So what do? You create these delay waveguides. See, you can see that the waveguides are different lengths here, arc lengths are different. So they will give you different phase shift. You know that light is propagating as e power I beta z. Okay, so if you change the length of the waveguide, you change the phase shift. So you can have phase shift phi 0, phi 1, phi 2, phi 3, phi n, or the phase shifts to different light waves coming across different waves. In order to use the same light wave, you use the input and output slabs. You can spread the light from this third port across all the ports here, and using this output slab, you can converge them to some ports. So the crux of the problem is there in the delays elements. So the analogy here is the antenna arrays. Some of you who would have studied antenna arrays, you know, if you have a linear array of antennas and you give progressive phase shift alpha 0, alpha 1, alpha 2, etc., you can beamform in some direction. Suppose you want to have a broadside firing or the end firing or at an angle of 60 degrees. What you do is you change the phase shift to each of these elements. Similarly, you can change the phase shift in each of these waveguides. Of course, this is a fixed phase shift. In this example, you have a fixed wavelength, fixed phase shift. Alpha 0, alpha 1, alpha 2, etc. each of the wavegates. So you can beamform in some particular way. So without, as a passive device, you can interconnect any of the ports to any of the ports in some combination. If you want to make a dynamically changing system, you can change the wavelengths here, the combination of wavelengths. You can encode the wavelengths. In the first one, you give lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, lambda 4, and in the second one, you shift the wavelengths lambda 2, lambda 3, lambda 4, lambda 1. You do some encoding at the input, and you can get an encoded one at the output. Depending on the coding at the input, you can get the functionality. So you can get any other matrix. Suppose I say y equal to ax is the function of this. You can change a by changing the wavelength. So the wavelengths can be used to control the function of these AWG. That's a very, very interesting thing. It's very useful in optical networks and many applications. Let us go to one more slide, please. So let us look at now some dynamic devices where we will control the light propagation. Okay. So these are all the effects: thermo-optic effect, electro-optic effect, magneto-optic effect, acousto-optic effect, non-linear optical effects. All these can be used in optical wavegates, and very interesting devices can be constructed. I'll give you some examples. Let us go. Next slide, please. So the first example is a thermo-optic device. Thermo-optic means you can change the refractive index by applying heat. How do you apply heat? You put heat or electrodes. See, what you are seeing is a Mach-Zehnder interferometer, which is familiar to you now. And those blackish ones are heater electrodes made out of some titanium film. Okay, and the waveguide itself is made in glass. This is called soda lime glass. And you can make waveguides in glass by using what is called this potassium ion exchange or silver ion exchange process. Okay, so don't worry about how these are fabricated. So those double lines are all waveguides in which there is a diffusion and light can stay in that. So as the light propagates, when you apply the heat, so the properties of the glass change, which will be reflected in the refractive index changes, and so you have a different effects. For example, you can get 0 state or 1 state at the output, 0 phase shift or 90 degrees phase shift based on the heat that you apply. Heat is in terms of the, you can calibrate in terms of the voltage, heating voltage. Okay, that is the thermo-optic device. The functionality is delta N changes with temperature. Let's go to one more slide. So electro-optic effect we have already seen in the beginning as an example. So we can use applied electric field to control. Just a minute, please. It has come out, or how is that? There's something.
Sir,
Yeah, the slides have come down or disconnected, or how is that?
no, sir, it is going on, sir. Electro-optic modulators, sir.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not able to see the slide. Just a minute. I think it's in some other window.
It is visible.
Yeah, okay, fine. It has come.
Sir.
So the window has changed suddenly somehow.
Okay.
Okay. We have already seen the electro-optic effect in the beginning. The functionality is that the refractive index is a function of the applied electric field. Electric field is applied once again in terms of the voltages on the electrodes. Okay. But the basic mechanism is electric field is influencing the refractive index. So the first one is Mach-Zehnder interferometer based bulk electro-optic modulator. So the second one is an interesting device. This is also a modulator, but at a high speed. If you go to high speed, say 10 gigahertz or 100 gigahertz, what happens is the electrodes are not lumped elements. You must consider them as a distributed transmission line or coplanar strip lines. In microwave ICs, you know there are different types of transmission lines. So you must treat them as a coplanar transmission lines. Sometimes there can be a ground plane also in the below. Anyway, whatever it is, they are microwave lines and they cannot be treated just as capacitors or inductors. Okay. So there's a microwave propagating on these electrodes, and in the below, in the substrate, in the lithium niobate, there is a interferometer, what you see. So there is a light wave propagating and there is a microwave propagating, and the properties, dielectric properties of the material are different at different frequencies. So there is interaction between the microwave and light wave, resulting in very good modulation characteristics. So the subject is called the microwave photonics. Microwave photonics is a subject where you combine microwaves and light waves. These are mainly applications to, there are a lot of applications, for example, to antennas. High speed modulation is itself is a microwave photonics phenomenon. So many ways that you can use this microwave photonics. Okay, let us go. So switching, electro-optic effect can be used for switching. You can have to, like I already mentioned with respect to directional coupler earlier. So once again, you can have a distributed electro-optic switches. You can, of course, from the design point of view, you divide them into several small segments and then apply. And you can also have an equivalent transmission line approach. So many ways you can study these electro-optic switches. Okay, that much enough for electro-optics. Let us go. So acousto-optic effect has a very interesting phenomenon. You can make optical signal processing using acousto-optic devices. Optical signal processing. So in this particular case, I am just giving you an example. You have this blackish patch is a what is called this IDT pattern, interdigitated electrode, where you can apply voltages, RF voltages, not static voltages, and then you can create gratings on the crystal. You can see that picture at the below. You have voltages which are alternating, plus voltage, minus voltage, plus voltage, minus voltage, etc. So there is a periodic change in the voltage along the direction of optical waveguide. Okay, periodic variation. That means it is a grating. And if you make it RF, if you change this rapidly at certain frequency, say 200 megahertz or 1 gigahertz, what happens? This will alternate, and the crystal itself, the lithium niobate crystal itself, has got acousto-optic properties. That means acousto-optic effect means the refractive index can change with the stress. Refractive index can be changed with stress or sound wave. So you can create a traveling wave on the crystal along the waveguide. So if there is an incident light, this traveling wave grating can deflect the light in some directions. So you can use this acousto-optic effect to create a lot of new devices. I'll show you one or two examples as we go along. You can do matrix multiplication, you can do Fourier transform, you can do spectral analysis. All the mathematical operations that you are familiar in signal processing can be done with acousto-optic effect in integrated optics form. Whether it is, all these things are of course definitely useful in many applications, but for those who want to do PhD, also there are very interesting subjects, and you can get a lot of papers by working on these subjects. Okay, let us go to another slide, please. Magnetic effects. Definitely light is an electromagnetic wave, and we would like to use not only electric effects, magnetic effects. For that, we need to create, you need to have devices with magnetic materials. You need to have magnetic waveguides, magneto-optic waveguides. So how do you do this? Is an important question. So there are a lot of material systems like garnets are important magnetic materials, yttrium aluminum garnet, yttrium iron garnet, and so on and so forth. So the idea in this is you need not invent completely new things, but you take the traditional integrated optical devices and coat magnetic materials on top of that. They will definitely have little bit of electrical properties also. So if you want to get magnetic properties, use magnetic materials, and you can combine them with traditional integrated optical materials to generate a lot of interesting devices. In particular, if you want to manipulate the polarization characteristics, if you want to manipulate, magnetic methods is very good. As a simple case, you can say that refractive index will change with magnetic field, and you know how to create magnetic fields also on the crystals. Not only using magnetic materials, you can have induction like devices, coils you can make on the waveguide, and you can create magnetic fields. So that's how we can make a lot of like some examples I have shown here, like TET, TM mode conversion, and all these things are possible. Yes, this is a slide which describes nonlinear effects. See, you know that light nonlinear effects means the material properties will, the refractive index will change with the incident light itself. Incident light itself. There is no external light that is changing the properties. But the light that is propagating itself can control the material properties, because already there is electric field, magnetic field, and all those things. So you can describe nonlinear effects by using the material polarization. P is the polarization vector, which can depend on the electric field. You use susceptibility coefficient, chi into E or chi square into E square, and so on, is the series description of different susceptibilities. So you can get many nonlinear effects. From that you can derive, say for example, second harmonic generation. Double the frequency can be generated. So if you launch a frequency of 840 nanometers, you can get a light of 420 nanometers. Similarly, you can do the wave mixing, 3-wave mixing. So many things can be done by using these nonlinear effects. So once again, lithium niobate is a crystal which has got a nonlinear effects, nonlinear properties. We can use anisotropic properties are there, nonlinear properties are there, and so on. But of course, a lot of design-oriented difficulties are there. We should understand the phenomena clearly. Then only we can apply them to some devices. Simply by making a waveguide and passing light through this, we will not be able to make a second harmonic generator. We cannot make just like that. You have to do phase matching, you have to do a lot of things. Okay. Yes, let us go. So now let us look at some systems, integrated optical systems. Like I have given 3 examples: fiber optic communications, optical storage, optical sensors, and so on. I'll show you one or 2 examples of each. Let us go. So this is the simple 4x4 fiber optic switch array made on lithium niobate. What you see, there are 5 electro-optic switches: S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. Each of them can be in the crossover state or bar state. There are 4 input ports and 4 output ports. You can create a matrix of Y equal to AX. Some input combinations with output combinations are possible, and you can program it. See, you can put these S1, S2, S3, S4, S5 in whatever state you want, 0 or 1, crossover or bar state. Based on that, you can change the matrix. Connectivity matrix can be changed by using this 4x4 switch, 5 switch configuration. In fact, nowadays there is a lot of interest in what is called this programmable photonics. Programmable photonics. If you have a device, its function can be programmed by using some controls outside. This is a good example of that also. So you can do a lot of things with this. Of course, you will have to study many things like the crosstalk issues, then all the connectivities. You can easily guess that all combinations are not possible here. If you connect first one to last one and last one to first one, etc., some combinations you cannot. You can easily work out what are possible, what is not. Okay, let us go. So this is an example of an optical information processing system. This is a spectrum analyzer, RF spectrum analyzer. What you see here is a chip on which you have 2 lenses, geodesic lenses they are called. Circles are geodesic lenses. They will spread the light and also focus the light. These are 2 functions, like in a conventional lens. So you have a laser diode bringing in the light into the first lens, and the output lens, and you have at the output, you have a photo detector array to receive the signals. Okay, the lenses, and in between the lenses, you have the traveling wave configuration, a SAW transducer. A grating is created in between. So the grating will split the incoming laser spectrum into output ports. So you can get a spectrum analyzer. Whatever is the spectrum of the laser diode will appear at the photo detector array. Similarly, you can also make RF spectrum analyzer. So this IDT pattern, whatever you see, to that you give an RF signal. For example, from an extraterrestrial source, if you have a microwave radiation source, you apply it to this. Then what happens? Each of the components of the microwaves are split at different output photodetector array. So you can do the RF spectrum analysis, or optical spectrum analyzer. It can also be used as optical spectrum analyzer. Let us go to one more example. So this is an example of a sensor, fiber optic sensor. So fiber optic sensors are important. They have very, very sensitive properties, much more sensitive than conventional sensors, and lot of new functions, new parameters can be sensed in an interesting way, and so on. So what you see here is called the fiber optic gyroscope. The rectangular box, the chip, is the integrated optical chip for a fiber optic gyroscope. The right side, what you see, the coil, is the fiber optic coil. It has got several rounds of fiber optics, and in fact, it is not so small as it shows here. In fact, the whole device will be of the size of a tiffin box, and on the boundary of the tiffin box, you can wind the coil. That's how it looks. And inside this box, you put a small chip. The chip itself is very small, of the size of 2.5 millimeters length and about say some 100 micron or so width. Very small. Small pieces. Like you imagine, if you have a box of some paneer butter masala. Many of you like. So if you are eating a paneer butter masala in a tiffin box, so the chip is of the size of those paneer, and the box is like this. The size of that tiffin box is the size of the coil. Okay. The main principle of this fiber optic gyroscope is you have the coil in the clockwise and counterclockwise direction. You launch the light, and the phase difference between the clockwise and anti-clockwise will give you the phase shift. The measure of angular velocity, omega, is proportional to the phase shift. You can make very, very sensitive measurements by using this fiber optic gyroscope of the orders of a few degrees per hour. You can make very small changes in the rotation. We may not be able to perceive. Suppose a rocket is slightly changing its course, we can easily detect its change, and you can make corrections. As you know, like in the space applications and all, we have to control these movement accurately. So this fiber optic gyroscope is absolutely necessary for that. Similarly for aircraft control and so on, everywhere, a lot of places. So this is one of the projects that we did under my Professor Selvarajan, and when I was a student. And this is a real device now. This is being used in the, there were projects from DRDO labs, and this is a real device now which is working. Okay, they are applying in many of these systems, in missiles and tanks and all those places. Let us go to another slide. So this is the application, very popular some time ago. Not nowadays, of course, it doesn't have so much relevance, but idea is useful. Japanese are they liked the idea of this optical storage. So they were continuously increasing the density on a disk, optical disk, and the reading and writing mechanisms were necessary. The optics was limiting the size of this recording and reading out. So there was a chip which can very accurately point and read these bits. So you have a grating lens, the lens come grating. You can, this is called a grating coupler or grating lens. And you have all the mechanisms like beam splitting and so on and so forth. And then a laser diode to launch light, and then photodetector array, and of course a lot of electronics is needed to achieve this function. It's not very popular. Recently, I don't find much papers on this, but I think it will. The idea is necessary. It will be useful in some other application. Let us go further. So until now, we have talked about what is called this conventional integrated optics. If you're taking a course on integrated optics, we can learn up to that point. But now in the research, what is new that is happening? There are three important topics in photonic integrated circuits if someone wants to do research. Of course, a lot of applications, but from the device point of view, there are three important devices. The gratings, which you have seen earlier, then these ring resonators, which I will describe now, and then the photonic bandgap structures, which I will describe later. Okay, so this is the chart which shows various ring resonators. You have the waveguide in the form of a ring. That middle one, you can see the colored one is the simulation of that. You launch light into the input port, down port, or top port, and then you can get it at the reflected port. There are 4 ports, 2 input ports and 2 output ports. You can configure this ring resonator. Those are called bus waveguides. The two waveguides are called the bus waveguides. There are 4 ports altogether. You can configure this so that you can receive the light from any of the ports. You can launch from one port and receive other ports, but most popular is the reflected port. So it is wavelength dependent. The light, the reflected light is dependent on the wavelength. That is an important property of this ring resonator. A lot of interesting features. The property of ring can be controlled with the radius, with the coupling between the bus and the waveguide, and so on and so forth. Okay, you can also make rings of rings. That is another interesting thing that we do. You have many rings across a bus. You can couple across the rings. You are seeing there, and a lot of SEM photographs are there of fabricated devices. So you can fabricate these ring resonators in IISc also. In our nano center, there is a center for, many of you know that there is a center for nanoscience in engineering. You can fabricate these using silicon. So in our lab also we have done several of these ring resonators. If someone is interested, you can get in touch with us. Okay, this is now somewhat well-known technology, but applications are many. There are a lot of applications are not explored. In particular, I would suggest if someone is interested to work on these for quantum applications, you can create an AND gate or NOT gate using ring resonator. Quantum ring gate or quantum OR gate or quantum NOR gate can be constructed using this ring resonator. One of course, some of my students are working on this, but still some of the problems are open. If you want to come to IISc for research, you are welcome. Let us go to another slide. So these are all the applications. We can go faster now. We are getting closer to the time. We can have some discussion later. So everything can be, a lot of things can be done. A little bit of mathematics also I have put for those who are interested. But I would suggest you to concentrate on the last top picture in the first quadrant. So these are the characteristics of the ring resonator. So you can see that there is a very sharp peaks or dips. If you launch the ring resonator, can resonate at many wavelengths and very sharp. So this is the formula for resonant wavelength. Similarly, you have what is called the field enhancement, you have a spectral range, you have the spectral width, the quality factor. These are all the things very easily derived. Not much mathematics is needed, only a little bit of matrix theory and little bit of the coupling. See, that crucial part is the coupling between the bus waveguide and the ring. For that also, there is a formula and you can get going with it. Okay. The final topic is called the photonic band gap structures. Many people are interested in this subject and they have very versatile features and very small, and they are on some, nowadays they are called this as nano photonics also. So here what you have is refractive index variation in both X and Y directions. The first picture 2A is nothing but a conventional grating, and the other two are photonic band gap structures. So we can take the analogy of photonic band gap structures with semiconductor devices. Electronic devices also, you have ions periodically arranged, and so you have conventional band, this valence band and conduction band. So there is a stop band. So certain energies are not allowed. Similarly, certain frequencies are not allowed to propagate in these photonic band gap structures. So you can have many configurations, rectangular configuration, hexagonal configuration, and so on and so forth. You can see the next slide for the picture of this is how you will explain. You have to use the plane wave expansion theory to study how the band gap is formed and what happens if you introduce defects and all that. Let us look at next slide, which has got the spectrum. So this is the spectrum of photonic band gap structure. Between this is designed like 1.5 to 1.6 microns in the communication band. It is stop band. So you can create defects in this. How would we use this? You create defects in the photonic crystal. You can create a point defect or line defect, and you can create the peaks in this. And all those will depend on the characteristics, lattice constant, filling ratio, dielectric constant. All those will influence the band characteristics as well as the peaks that you can get. Let us go to some one or two applications. So similar to other things, there are a lot of applications are there. I will give one or two examples. Let us go to another slide. So this is an example of a 4-channel comb filter that one of my student, Mr. Aditya, has done. So you see a line defect in the square lattice of photonic band gap structure, and then there are 4 point defects C1, C2, C3, C4, and then there are 4 output waveguides, waveguide 1, 2, 3, 4, connected to detectors D1, D2, D3, D4. So when the light is launched from source S into this line defect waveguide, and they couple to the output ports through C1, C2, C3, C4. And they are designed, C1, C2, C3, C4 are designed such that they operate at different wavelengths. The resonant wavelength of the cavity can be designed. So you see the spectrum. See the on the right hand side you see this propagation simulation. At that time when Aditya worked, it was only simulation. Now we can fabricate these. We have fabricated these for sensor applications. So you can see the spectrum below. You can see all the line defect spectra. Okay. So you have 4 peaks at different wavelengths, and also on the right hand side the table you see all the characteristics like what is the refractive index, contrast, lambda of resonant wavelength, FWHM, Q factor, and all those things. Okay, let us go one more. So this is a 12 channel comb filter similar to that, but improved characteristics and a lot more challenging design. So nowadays, as you know, nowadays there are simulators for this. A lot of people are interested in hands-on experience or hands-on simulation tutorials. I would say that you don't need all that. Even if you want to learn the simulator, it is very, very easy. You download, there are 2 tools, very common tools most people use, MIT photonic bandgap structures, MPB and MEEP, microwave electromagnetic emulation tool. These things are there, developed by MIT. You just download them, put it into your Linux or whatever system. I think we use on Linux, and everything is self-explained. Help files are there. You don't need any tutorial to learn those. You can learn yourself, I would say. Only thing you will need is applications. See, nowadays there is a tendency by everyone not to learn yourself. You want someone to teach you. It is good thing, you can learn quickly, but unless we put effort ourselves, we cannot learn. I would suggest everyone to try MPB and MEEP yourself. Download and install. And installation is a problem, that I will agree. Installation is not so straightforward. There will be some, depending on your Linux version, you will have a lot of difficulties in installing, but it can be done. Okay, let us go. So these are the characteristics of the comb filter, how it varies with dielectric constant, all those things. We'll go to one more slide and we'll try to finish off soon. Few more. These are all the characteristics of various combinations of refractive index defects, resonant wavelengths, and all those things are shown here. One more, please. One more topic is there. I want to show before we close. This is called optical MEMS. So optical MEMS can be said to be a combination of micro optics, micromechanics, and microelectronics on a small chip. So it will combine electrical components, optical components, mechanical components in the same substrate. 1 or 2 examples I will show you. Let us go. So the most common ones are mirrors. People have made thousands of mirrors on a small substrate. You are seeing one of the mirrors here, which has got a flange and a circular patch, reflecting area, and also you see the scratch drive mechanism actuator to move them. See, these mirrors have to be moved, is it not? You have to adjust, otherwise there is no use. So mirror can reflect light. So now the mirror is lying erect, and when it lies flat, it cannot reflect. So you can see the right picture how it is used. So the mirror is in the pop-up state or down state. So when it is popped up, it can reflect some signals coming from the input optical fibers. So you can interconnect any set of optical channels from optical fibers into any of the output ports. This is the required functionality, and now you can imagine how you will program it, what is necessary, what combinations are possible. All those things can be worked out. And the more important thing is how to construct this mirror. This will need what is called this surface micromachining technology. MEMS technology we have to learn. I suppose you have had some exposure to technology aspect in this FDP. So you can think of how this can be constructed or how they can be fabricated. A lot of challenges are there. It's not so straightforward as using it in an application. Okay, let us go. So there are a lot of optical MEMS that have come into in the practice. You have for optical MEMS for networking applications. You have optical MEMS for power control applications. A lot of examples I am showing you here, including the mirrors of the previous slide. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of various devices developed by MEMS technology. Okay. So you can see some standard paper to summarize your own set of applications. This is somewhat old slide. So this is a project which we did in our lab under the National Program on Smart Materials and Structures, NPSM, where we made an interferometer on a silicon and etched out a diaphragm. This technology can be called as bulk micromachining. You simply etch out only a diaphragm. You don't need sophisticated surface micromachining process like in that making of that micromirror. Okay, so below the arm of the interferometer, like you can see in the first picture, below the arm of interferometer, you etch out the diaphragm. That means when you put pressure on top of this waveguide, when that on this diaphragm, the waveguide properties will change, and so there is a phase shift. You can measure pressure versus phase shift or the intensity output at the port, and you can calibrate. You can make it as a pressure sensor. Okay, let us go. One more. So this is a typical characteristic: pressure on x-axis and phase shift on the y-axis. It depends on the modes. TE mode will have different properties, TM mode will have different properties, and so on and so forth. Typically, you can say that you will require about 100 microradians of phase shift that you can get per kilopascal type of pressure. Okay, let us go. I think that's all I will have. We can discuss a lot more things. So yeah, these are all the various design parameters. This is one of the research of one of my PhD student, Dr. Patnaik, who is now in BITS Hyderabad. Let us go to one more slide. Yeah, I think that's all I have. A lot of references are there. I have not put all this. It is not updated properly. So there are a lot of confusion about my slides. So whatever I got, I pulled out. But I would say that there are a lot of literature is available in the IEEE and also on the web, and in our website also it's there. For those who are interested in photonics, I would definitely suggest to join this IEEE Photonics Society, and a lot of programs are there and a lot of professional benefits and personal benefits. You can be an EXICOM member. I mean, I will be assuming the faculty are there here, and you will greatly benefit from the research papers that are published in that. I think it is absolutely necessary for us to be professionally active. It is not enough if we do our job as a lecturer or a professor or just as a student also, for that matter. So we should think about our profession, what happens in this technology in future, how to network with others, how to benefit, how to share our information. There will be a lot of recognition for those who do good work. Please don't sit in your lab or in your office only and do all these things. You please interact with others, and we'll have great opportunity in photonics. So I hope that we will play an important role. Most of you who are listening to these FDPs will learn some aspect of this photonics and contribute, and also improve your professional careers and so on. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Sorry if I am very critical of many things. So I am very critical about the progress that is happening on the education system, on the government involvement, on the industry, role of industry, and so many things we need to change and improve. Then only we can match with advanced countries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful talk here. So, any questions from participant side? You can please unmute yourself and speak.
Excuse me, sir. What is the typical distance between two channels in a coupler to enable this quantum tunneling?
It is not quantum tunneling. It is classical wave phenomena, and typical dimensions are a few microns. 4 microns waveguide width on lithium niobate.
No, not about the width. Not the width, sir. Between the gap between the two waveguides.
Yeah, that's right. Gap also is about 4 microns, 2 microns, 4 microns, and so on. On silicon, it is of the orders of 100 nanometers, 50 nanometers, 100 nanometers, etc. Gap. Waveguide itself is 500 nanometers in silicon, because the refractive index is very high, 3.5.
But you are mentioning in one of your slides, you are mentioning about quantum tunneling, sir.
Yes.
Sir. In that there is a coupler, there will be a coupler and there will be two channels.
Yes.
And quantum tunneling will happen between these two channels. So that is what I was.
What I mentioned was, I have taken an analogy of quantum mechanical effect like thing in optical waveguides. In the optical waveguides, whatever shown is wave phenomena, not quantum phenomena.
Okay.
The light will tunnel from first waveguide to the second waveguide just by wave phenomena, no quantum. The analogy is in electronics. If you have a barrier, potential barrier, two layers, for example, gallium arsenide and aluminum gallium arsenide layers, you know that there is a band gap and electrons cannot cross over the barrier. But still, there is a finite probability that electron is there on the other side. Your tunnel diode is making use of that effect. Similarly, it is similar phenomena, not quantum phenomena. Quantum phenomena also you can study. If you have a single photon tunneling or going through the optical waveguide, it can tunnel into the second waveguide by quantum mechanical phenomena.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
So in diode, it depends on the barrier thickness.
Yes.
So here also I was thinking.
Tunnel diode, it depends on the barrier thickness. Similarly, the gap of between the waveguides will play an important role in tunneling light.
Okay, sir.
Not
Thank you,
tunneling
sir.
process of light.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the participant side? Hope there are no questions, sir, from participant side. I'll conclude now. Sir, actually this session was very useful and very interactive, and you have explained very in detail about 4-channel comb filter, 12-channel comb filter, and what is required for the participants, like I think with this session participants got inspired by your words, sir. So really it was a very excellent talk. Thank you so much, sir, for being a resource person with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for conducting this workshop itself. I'm
Thank
very
you,
happy
sir.
to participate in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, sir.